Today's class has to do mostly with ways in which we treat people and healing systems. We'll start off with the people in Siberia. There are lots of people who believe that illness comes from some sort of disruption in your relationships, either with other people who might be trying to do you harm, or supernatural, that you somehow need to restore balance with the supernatural. This is an example of what we call shamanic healing, which is connecting the spiritual world with the physical world and trying to rebalance your relationships with human beings and the cosmos or deities or things like that. And we might say, "Wow, what does that have to do with whether I'm healthy or sick?" But what I'll say is this: what you believe is very important for how the treatment goes, whatever it is, in whatever medical system you believe in. If you believe the doctor knows what they're doing and the pill they're taking they're giving you is going to work, it usually seems to have a better effect. We know this as a placebo effect because there are many pills that we can give people a sugar pill and say this is going to help you with your mental state, and people will improve on that. Not everybody. It's not to say that medicine doesn't have any effect, but whether you believe it or not has a huge effect on what's going on. Certainly, if you believe that your relationship with God or whatever deity that you believe in has been disrupted and you need to restore that balance in your life, that can have a huge effect on your emotions and your state of mind. And again, this might sound like, wow, why do people need to dress up in funny clothes to do that? But there are studies that show that if doctors come in a white lab coat, people are more likely to take their medicine from a doctor in a white lab coat. The doctor comes in just looking like me. They're like, must not even be a doctor. What the heck? I'm not taking this medicine. I don't believe it. So your belief in what happens and your connections to the whole world can play a big role in your life. In these sections of the chapter, it goes back to how long ago some of these things have been around. In this case, this is a ritual bundle from Bolivia about 1,000 years ago, so not that old, but you can see what's in it. There's stuff to sniff and tablets and little spatulas from a llama-bone. Oh, hallucinogenic residue. People have been in many different societies and throughout many ages have tried to create some connection to other worlds, and that sometimes has involved ingesting substances that are hallucinogenics and give you more access to that other world as a means of curing those relationships. So it is true that there might be drug use in other societies. Again, we probably don't want to lecture any other societies on their use of drugs because probably our society has taken that to extremes. But in other societies, such substances can be a part of connection to other worlds and used in a number of different healing practices. It seems like, again, this is going back 40, 50,000 years into the 100,000 years into the Neanderthal lineages, not direct ancestors of human beings, but closely related, who seem to have a kind of plant knowledge about trying to cure people. So this has been an ancient thing, ancient practices, old things that have come up. It was a fascinating find because found very well preserved in the ice, I think about 5,300 years ago, with all his stuff and his body and all that stuff well preserved. In the textbook, they talk about the tattoos. That's kind of interesting because it looks like these tattoos are on common arthritic points or places where people develop arthritis. Ideas about puncturing the body, acupuncture, pressure points. Tattoos often have a ritual or a medical dimension in other societies. Oh, interesting examples of how long ago some of this stuff goes back and has been developed in the human lineage. So this is an example of you would use what we consider to be regular medicine or biomedicine, but you would also mix it with other remedies and these older, more traditional forms of medicine. So this was an example from Samoa and diabetes management that blended these approaches, both a sugars and treatments and prayer, church-based stuff. A lot of people put these things together. So in almost, I would say almost everywhere in the world, people know about aspirin and Tylenol and various medical treatments, but they also might combine them with what we would call ethnomedicine or different ways of belief systems which are older and more traditional. This happens in a lot of other places where they might have a more traditional health system and then add on the biomedicine. But it also happens in our own society where people might seek out things like acupuncture or natural remedies, or they just combine different belief systems. So with my parents, if you have to go to the doctor, they'll tell you to go to the doctor or the hospital, but they'll also tell me that they're praying for me. So it's not that they're not saying don't go to the doctor, but they also believe that God is going to ultimately be the arbiter of whether somebody is sick or healthy. Many people in the United States combine various religious traditions of healing with hospitals and biomedicine. Now, that brings us to what is biomedicine? Biomedicine refers to this idea that the medical system that we're mostly familiar with is you diagnose an illness, try to treat it in some way with a drug or a biomedical intervention. Biomedicine has obviously had a huge effect on the world. A lot of positive stuff. I talked in positive terms about vaccines and being able to get rid of some of the childhood illnesses that used to paralyze and kill a lot of kids. But it has also led to a lot of health inequalities where certain people in certain parts of the world and certain segments of society have access to the good stuff and other people don't. Tuberculosis is still the #1 infectious disease killer around the world. Tuberculosis could be eliminated. It would not even be that costly. But because of the health inequalities, we have commodified, or often we put a premium on certain treatments, and this directs the funneling of resources in our society. Later on in this section, they bring up a word that is known as biopower, which refers to how governments or institutions or public health try to regulate people's health and bodies and can result in differential treatments for different populations. So we talked about the issue of structural violence and how violence doesn't necessarily have to be something that happens from the point of a gun. It can be differential rates of cancers, let's say, if you are exposed to environmental toxins or diabetes or not having access to good food or adequate health care. So sometimes in the regulation of bodies that often comes from governments, but also corporations, certain people are seen, especially if they have money, as being able to get stuff. Now, biomedicalization has a lot of different faces, you might say. One of the interesting things is how South Korea has become the capital of the world for plastic surgery. And it's resulted in this standardization of beauty qualities so that people get, women in this case, get a certain plastic surgery form in order to conform to certain ideals. We sometimes think about this happening in our own society and beauty ideals, but oddly, perhaps, South Korea has become the center for a center, perhaps the world's largest center for plastic surgery treatments. Usually, we see these beauty standards applied to women. I don't know if I want to give this guy any screen time, but he's come up recently. This guy is trying to make it so that we all have to get surgeries. I don't want to give him any screen time. The only reason I'm doing this is to say that this doesn't just apply to women now. Your textbook also talks about how some of the traditional markets have been supplanted, or there's different ways in which, again, for the most part, a lot of this stuff is becoming combined, and there are different ways in which people have access to this. But it's certainly still an issue of how much these other systems are related to the biomedical one. In the same way that people do tourism to go to different parts of the world for not the best reasons, and there are certain parts of the world where you can buy in Oregon. You have people going to these places and getting transplant surgeries there. Again, this happens in other parts of the world and is a global health issue. But as your textbook points out, this is also something that happens in our own society because, as we may know, we do not all have equal access to health care. And things like dental and vision are often excluded from people's insurance plans. So we have people that have to stand in line and wait if they're even able to get dental care at all. So we see here, both within our own society or within any society, a differential between wealthy and poor, between people who might be connected to areas where they can get care. Biomedicine has done a lot of good for the world, but a lot of the treatments have been priced out of access for people, and the things that might be most beneficial and are not that expensive, like vaccinations, are not prioritized. Your textbook gives you another example of, of what we call biopower, where certain neighborhoods or areas are just not considered worthy of investment as a place where, because there was not clean water and sanitation services, there was a spread of cholera there, waterborne diseases. Again, not that difficult or expensive to prevent, but because people get left off the radar of the corporations in healthcare. For those of you who want to go into the healthcare industry, there's some interesting stuff at the end of this chapter on what they call structural competency. When people present their symptoms, they might do it in another language. They might do it in idioms which are difficult to understand. So a headache or a heartache may not mean that people need Tylenol. It may mean that they are talking about relationships in their social lives. In some societies, people talk about pain in their heads or different parts of their bodies, but they were referring to their social relationships and their anxiety, say, about their economic conditions. So if you are anxious about getting food, for example, and providing for your family, getting a Tylenol is not what you need. So what you need is addressing those kinds of, hey, you need to have food security or you need to have access to healthcare. So sometimes people express these as physical symptoms like, oh, I have a headache or my heart hurts. And if we're a doctor or a nurse, our prompting is, oh, they need X, Y, or Z. You need Tylenol or Advil. But the truth of the matter is that if you're listening more carefully, what they're really asking for is access to food security or education or having a better place in life. Physical safety. If you are going into the police or into healthcare or into any profession, it's just important to listen to the people that you are talking to and to try and communicate with them about what they are trying to tell you. So this can be an important part of nurse training. Sometimes people communicate these things in different ways, and it's important to listen to that. To cap this off, a short video from Paul Farmer. Paul Farmer was a medical doctor, but also an anthropologist, and he is probably responsible for bringing the idea of structural violence into the conversation, because that's what he was talking about, was the ways in which different populations suffer from diseases that in some cases are quite preventable. Sadly, he died in his sleep at a fairly young age in Rwanda when he was trying to do healthcare in that area. This video is from a little bit earlier called I Believe in Healthcare as a Human Right.